So let's talk about youths. Oh, by the way, let me ask you, have you had your cocoa or cocoa? Because that's what Alero asked me to ask you before we begin this conversation. Now, the youth population represents a vital force for economic growth and innovation in any country. And I've heard repeatedly from the president of the Africa Development Bank Group that Africa has a youth bulge, and about 70 plus or minus % of Africans are young people. Over 50% of the global population is under 30. Youths ages 16 to 24 make up 16% of this. And Nigeria's case is rather peculiar. One of the youngest populations in the world, 70.6% of its population under the age of 30.
Whoa.
Yeah. So, what do we owe them? In Nigeria, we have unemployment and underemployment rates among young people, and the numbers are alarming. Empowering this demography is essential for sustainable economic growth. Two gentlemen are here with us to discuss this. Architect Ovie Benije is vocational training and water solutions consultant. Thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, as well as Mr. Maurice Ekong, who is lead consultant, Morana. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Let me begin with you, sir.
It's Ekpong.
Ekpong, yes.
Ekpong. Okay. So let me begin with you, sir. How precarious is that situation that we have such a huge population of young people? How precarious do you think it is for you?
Extremely precarious. Wow. Extremely. Emphasis on extremely. Precarious is a very dangerous word already because it's talking about a tipping point, right? Now, when you add extremely to it, it gives you a reality check of where you find yourself, and not doing something about it urgently can lead to a crisis that you have zero control over. That's how bad the situation is. Now, we have enabled over time a belief system that you can earn without working. It's impossible. The only reason somebody pays you money, the only reason somebody gives you money in exchange is because you have helped him solve a problem. Now, we have a bulging youth population, and it's not just the youth in Nigeria, sadly, that add no value to anybody and yet expect financial reward. Just turning up in our psyche is enough to earn a reward. A nation can never stand with that premise in the mind of its people, and especially the mind of the youth.
Mr. Benije, I wonder if you saw that video about a boy of about 9 or 10 who was asked what he wanted to become when he grew up. And his prompt answer, without even thinking about it, was a Yahoo boy. So try telling that boy that he cannot make money without working.
Because at home, it's been ingrained in him. Okay, maybe not at home. Like I tell my son, you are listening to somebody. Somebody's voice is speaking in your mind every time you are thinking. And I pray it's my voice. Now, every human being you see walking on the street has a voice that is telling them what is ruling in their lives. Yeah. And this boy has grown up in an environment that has told him the easiest way to make it in life is by Yahoo. When I was growing up many years ago, somebody was asked, when you grew up, what do you want to become? He said, I want to be Igbinedion. Igbinedion was a prominent businessman in Benin. No, we're saying, do you want to become a doctor, an architect? He said, no, I want to be Igbinedion, finished. You know, his understanding of it was he saw somebody affluent who lived a larger-than-life lifestyle, and that was his aspiration. How he was going to get to that place didn't matter
that a
to
thought.
Let me ask you, Mr. Ekpong, the question of precarious. I remember, I think it was former President Obasanjo that also raised this issue that, look, if we don't address the issue of young people, as Architect Beniche said, we're on a ticking time bomb. So, is it that we're unaware?
I mean, I think for the longest, we've been aware. We didn't suddenly arrive at a youth population of 160 million, you know. I think the challenge has been a failure of planning over time to accommodate this number of young people. Again, on the question you asked Architect Ovie, it's not like having a youthful population of 70% is precarious. It's also an opportunity.
Right? I asked that first.
Yes.
And there is a reason. I have heard former President Obasanjo speak.
Yes.
I have heard President of the AFDB also speak about young people, seeing them as opportunities. Of course, it's an opportunity. But the fact that we are not giving them the attention, the fact that rather than exploit the oil that they are, we leave them to their own whims and caprices. It is precarious.
Yes, it is. And I'll give you a personal example. I think it was in 2021, myself and some colleagues brought in an expert to appraise an opportunity somewhere in Cross River. This was an agriculture opportunity. Some of the rundown oil palm estates, to be precise. And then when this British guy came, you know, somewhere in Cross River, there were so many young people on Okadas doing nothing. And he said to me, 2021, that if you have this many people doing nothing, you have problems on your hands. You know, so that's Cross River, but this is also a prevalent problem across the country.
Nationally.
You know, you go to the north, you see so many people milling around doing nothing. You go to the east, so many people milling around doing nothing. So, so these people become fodder for any kind of opportunity just as a survival mechanism. Right, so the person who comes with the highest, you know, maybe the best promise for the highest returns, no matter how dangerous, no matter how illegal, you know, those people are just to survive are going to move in their direction.
Okay, let's
Mr.
make progress.
Okay, you have made the point now. We have plenty of young people milling around, practically in all the 36 states of the country and Abuja, milling around doing nothing. So we need to make them do something. We need to get their minds busy. Otherwise, they will become cannon fodder for Boko Haram and God knows what else is brewing that we haven't even seen yet. So, what are our plans for getting these children occupied, being productive, and being able to look after themselves?
Okay, so the federal government has come up with what they call an ASO Accord to do financial, economic inclusion for our youth, right? Now, the only way to get them away from harm, first for themselves and then for the nation, is to get them creatively engaged in productive activity. Now, productive activity requires you to design goals. When you design goals, you come up with plans to achieve those goals. Then you find the people who will enter into the plan to achieve those goals. Now, the people need to learn to work. The people need to be made to understand that they need to, and frankly, a lot of people want to work. They don't want to be idle, right? Now, our focus is on empowering the people. So empowerment of its own is not a goal. Empowerment is a vehicle. Now, that vehicle needs to be targeted at a goal. So I'll give you an example of South Korea. South Korea in the 60s decided that they were going to be an electronic hub, an automobile hub. So the government says, we will teach our people to learn the skills for these two industries. So they partnered with General Motors. General Motors was the foundation for Kia. For Kia.
Yes.
Opel was the foundation for Daewoo. So these companies went to Korea to set up car manufacturing industries. And then they trained their people. What we call handwork. Artisan skills. These are the foundations for any and every economy. Handwork. The people who produce nails, the people who produce screws, the people who produce screwdrivers. They are cottage industries in people's homes, but they need to be trained. So the key here is training. Training is never just a word that you bandy around. Vocational skills are honed. They are trained. You get people, practitioners who are committed to training people, who will train the people who will become the anchor points for these industries. Because when you have industries, it draws in the people. It draws in the people. We have a large industry in Nigeria called the construction industry. Estates are being built everywhere. All kinds of buildings are being, roads are being built, and they require trained personnel. We don't have those trained personnel right now in Nigeria. So we have a challenge with establishment. Establishment is both government and private sector. So we have large construction industries, companies, for instance, Julius Berger, Craneborg, G. Kappa, plethora of them.
Yeah.
Now, we need to get them committed to getting our people trained. We're not looking for engineers. Our universities are producing engineers. The bricklayer, the plumber, the bricklayer and mason are two different people. The tiler, the people who run the lights, and all those things, we need to get them to commit to bringing in skilled people. First stage is we get the trainers, an army of trainers that we will now deploy to different parts of the country, and then do advocacy on radio. Go to palaces. They call their people. We talk to them about vocational skills. I'm a trained plumber. I'm an architect, but I'm a trained plumber. I trained as a plumber when I was 46 years old. Not because the goal was for me to become a plumber, but to train plumbers who will do work for you and you will not have problems. We don't have those people in Nigeria presently. So when we have an army of trained people, the army of trained people from Togo, from Benin, from as far away as Senegal, that come to take away our money will be cut off. If I tell you the amount of money that leaves this country through those artisans, it's mind-boggling. But that's money that should be sitting in our pockets here in Nigeria.
Perhaps the challenge has always been, because this problem you just highlighted now happens in South Africa, happens in the US, and a number of other things. Like sometimes when you're at home, you don't know what you have. But you know,
go and ask Trump what he's going through now that he has deported everybody.
Exactly the point that I'm making.
Yeah.
So, but now, Mr. Ekbong, perhaps one of the challenges is how we communicate with the young people. They have their language code. As Idi Kabasa said at a conference he spoke at, every generation has its language code. We can't ignore that language code, otherwise we will be lost in communicating with them. When architect Biniche and Alero were growing up, they didn't dare look at their parents in the eye. Now you sit down there. What's the first question you're going to hear?
Why?
Why?
And it's the same for the millennials, Gen X, or Gen Z, or whatever you call them. Now, and of course, Gen Alpha, they're gonna. There's a whole language code, you know, all by itself. So while I totally align with what Architect Biniche is saying, are we speaking to them in a way they can see what we're saying? It's a whole load of money, he's very correct, leaving this country. But are we speaking to them in a way that they can say, okay, you're right, I think I'm ready to get my hands dirty?
Yeah, so that's a very interesting question. The straight answer would be no, perhaps. I mean, because if we are, the whole objective of communication is to get the right feedback. So if we are not getting the right feedback, and we haven't for some time, then it means we are not exactly communicating with them. Someone said we must adapt to changing times while holding on to unchanging principles. So true, the previous generations had their own communication models, had their own understanding of language and everything. And this generation has a very different perspective to things. So I think very clearly, maybe policymakers or governments that have plans like they have for economic inclusion, which the architect alluded to, must also find a way to communicate exactly what the benefits are to the, to the youth that they're targeting. If you go to a Dubai, or you go to a Middle Eastern country, or you go to any other country, you go to Singapore, you find people on the streets communicating and understanding the vision of the country and keying into that because they see that, this benefits me. But in Nigeria, there is no Nigerian dream, so to speak, right? If we talk about economic inclusion, the person down the road doesn't even see how that benefits them, right? You talk about whatever policy government proposes, you can't find the ordinary person on the street, let alone the youth, speaking to them and owning those policies, owning all of that. So I think the first place to start would be to clearly paint a vision of where we are going as a people, right? The government, President Tinubu's administration wants to see a $1 trillion dollar economy by 2030. Now, how will the 160 million Nigerian young people key into that, and what would be their, the benefit for them, right? How would they see themselves in that vision, and how would that affect their own pocket?
That's another very, very good way to look at the issue, leading me to another question, Architect Biniche. While the president is looking at a $1 trillion $1 trillion economy in Nigeria, he's also looking at a 30-day youth conference. And so when we had a guest here, sitting right where you are, Architect Biniche, Dr. Samadi Emi, I asked him, if you had to be a part or consult for that conference, with the president, what would you recommend? He said the president should go to that conference with images, paint pictures for the young people, and put it before them and say, this is the Nigeria we are thinking about. What do you guys think? And naturally, one would say that the way to communicate that will be through the educational system, right? I've over time looked at the Nigeria Education Research and Development Council's efforts at creating educational curricula, and I'm looking for the future in those curricula. I see Chinese children using whatever to build houses, do all kinds of things that look like they're playing. But I'm looking for the future in the educational curricula. Do you think that's a problem? Or you think it's just we're just building into something?
Curriculum development is so critical, and who designs the curriculum becomes the real issue. First who, then what, right? First who. If you don't have the right people doing the job, then, the job is already dead from the very beginning. So, you see, for instance, everybody's mind is fixated on what's in it for me. What am I going to get out of it at the end of the day, right? Now, if I tell you that you sit down in an office as a graduate, how much do you earn per month? On the average in Nigeria today, what a starter graduate, what working in the bank, how much does he earn in a month? I don't think he earns more than 250,000 naira if he earns up to that. What do you think? Does he end up to 250,000 a month?
Yeah, I think one of the banks recently opted to about 500,000 for entry level.
So I was about to tell you, it depends on the bank.
So you now ask yourself, how many people can the bank industry employ? So how many openings are there in those spaces that everybody is sitting down and wanting to enter into? But now, I employ plumbers, for instance, and I pay a plumber for every day he turns up for work. I pay him 10,000 naira a day. If he works for 24 days in a month, he earns 240,000 naira that month. Now, I can get him to do work consistently through the month, and some plumbers, some bricklayers are earning more than what sitting down in the office is going, and it is guaranteed.
Yes.
There is enough work to go around. So much work is going on, but there aren't people to do them. Ayo, as you drive down the road, you see so much need, so much work that needs to be done, but there aren't people to do them. That's because people do not know that there's economic benefit in doing these things. And the people who should recognize these things, these gaps, as job opportunities and offer them to people to do them, are also not recognizing the gaps. So, painting a picture is extremely important of it is only when you work that you get money. It is only when you work that you get money. So we have to define, for instance, what industries do we want to function in Nigeria? Because it is industries that employ people. ICT, how many people can ICT employ in Nigeria? The entertainment industry, what percentage of Nigerians can it employ? Very little. But there are the hard day-by-day work that goes on that needs trained people. Emphasis on trained. Because somewhere along the line, we have, acculturated ourselves to manage them like that. Manage them like that. No, we must move away from that manage them like that syndrome and get people trained. And this training means that you must paint the picture of the end of the training to the people.
Well, someone is agreeing with you,
yes.
Professor Sakimboyewa. It says, if we must empower youths for economic inclusion, government at all levels must invest in apprenticeship.
Yes.
That will allow young people to earn while they learn. Also, government at all levels must work in partnership with the private sector and encourage the creation of jobs that do not require formal education. So, you're not the only one.
Yeah. Mr. Binisie, what has happened to the many technical schools that dotted this country? One, if they are still alive, what quality of technical skills are they turning out? Okay,
so at some point, I think under Murtala's government, right, before Obasanjo, we sent city and guilds away from Nigeria. That we don't. Our emphasis was not on technical skills. Our emphasis was on degree. And so you see that same malaise. We are converting Yaba Tech to university. We are converting colleges of education to university. What's all this madness about degrees? University education produces people who are supposed to conceptualize. But the larger population are the hands and legs of the doing. So the focus should be on the hands and legs. Now, sadly, no technical schools. There are vocational schools scattered across the country, empty, doing nothing. Now, listen, a few years ago, an NGO approached me to interview prospective trainers for them. And they got people from colleges of technology, heads of departments and lecturers in the colleges of technology. And I sat down, because I'm a certified assessor and a trainer. And I sat down and I interviewed them, heads of departments and trainers in these technical colleges, and none of them passed the muster. They didn't know what to do. When I asked, because you see, technical skills are taught both theoretically and then practically. They couldn't link the two, heads of department, over plumbing skills, masonry skills. They couldn't. See, I did a study.
These are the supposed trainers.
These are the supposed trainers. I downloaded the MBTE curriculum for vocational skills in Nigeria. Why do you want to train an iron bender for 2 years? Why do you want to keep him in a system for 2 years? No. Vocational skills are supposed to be a fast-track method of getting people involved in the economic development of the country while acquiring a skill. Now, in saner climes, you can be a carpenter in NNPC, for instance, and earn as much as the MD because of the value you put on the table.
Yes.
So it's not your qualification that determines your income. It is your value that determines your income. And value, like I tell people, is never measured in monetary terms. Value determines your worth. And then your worth is now translated to money.
You know,
Naira and Kobo.
let me ask you, Mr. Ekpong, so where do we go from here? We have 3 minutes.
So where do we go from here? We must translate that vision into actionable points, right? You have 774 local governments. You probably have about 8,000 something wards. And all of these local areas are excluded from the formal economy. Why don't we develop a strategy where we are, developing, maybe cottage industries in all these localities based on their comparative advantage, and empower young people in those areas to, take on entrepreneurship opportunities, to set up there as a basis for entering the formal economy and getting empowered.
It sounds like we're putting it at the all of it at the doorstep of government. Michael Olatunbosun says, family is the mill for proper upbringing.
Yes, and then this one, who does, the sender didn't write their name. Matters Arising says, everything is connected to economy. We need to overhaul. Full stop.
Okay, Sam says, as a country, we have missed our way. If you visit most of the big hotels in most major cities, you see a lot of youth just lazing around. Some make money from Yahoo and check into these hotels to, quote, enjoy their life, unquote, with friends.
Emmanuel Dowd.
Major reorientation, hard work pays. This should be the new slogan.
Emmanuel Daudu, the current certified educational system that we operate in this country is not geared towards economic empowerment of our youths. It has become compelling to inject technical skills acquisition training programs in our educational curriculum.
And this one also from Professor Nakena. Empowering youths for economic inclusion requires a multifaceted approach that enhances their skills, access to opportunities, and participation in decision-making. Equip young people with practical skills relevant to the job market like IT, agriculture, manufacturing. Teach financial literacy, business management, and problem-solving to encourage self-employment. Promote education in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, STEM, to meet modern economic demands. Well, I dare say, gentlemen, that your time is not up. But because we will pick this up again.
This is a very important discussion.
Honestly, extremely.
We need to get those young people off the streets, and we need to get them productive.
Get into their heads first, as Mr. Benici said earlier. First of all, get into their heads to change their paradigm, their orientation about some of these issues. Thank you so much for your
Talking
time.
about orientation, do we need the NOI
NOA.
NOA, rather.
I sincerely believe we do. See, the first people's heads we need to get into is the heads of the parents, the adults.
Okay.
Now, if I ask you, Alero, for instance, no, not Alero. If I ask you, Ayo, if your son were to tell you that he wants to become a plumber, what would be your first reaction? God forbid.
Is he persuaded? Me? No.
No, no. Okay, so I mean,
Is he persuaded?
your general contemporary out there in society would say, God forbid.
But times have changed.
We pray so.
Times have changed.
If my son says that's what he wants to do, are you persuaded?
Just make sure that you are the best that there is.
We pray so.
Full stop.
Thank you so much for coming this morning. Mr. Ovie Biniche is a vocational training and water solutions consultant. Thank you for your time. As well as Maurice Ekpong, who is lead consultant, Morana. Thank you so much for your time this morning.